Welcome to the REI Diamond Interview, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom with Dan Breslin.
Welcome to the REI Diamond Show with David Krulac on creating huge value through subdividing residential acreage. I'm Dan Breslin, host of the REI Diamond Show. Today's guest is David Krulac, author of the popular real estate book, How I Started With Nothing and Made $12 million in Real Estate. David is located near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and has bought and sold more than 900 properties for his own account, one of which being a 100-acre parcel, which he then subdivided and sold for a profit of more than $1 million. Since developing raw land is one of my own personal real estate goals, I was extremely excited to finally get David on the show and took several pages of notes myself. If land development and doing absolute home run, top-notch, quality real estate deals is something that you are personally interested in, I suggest you grab a pen and a pad and get ready to enjoy the show. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks for having me on, Dan. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we are mutual friends and acquaintances with some of the people in the market, and you hail from about 100 miles outside of our Philadelphia market, where I grew up in the business and started originally. So this is going to be an interesting episode. We have some really cool topics, but just so people listening can get a feel for who you are, do you want to talk about how you got started in real estate and what your business looks like today, David?
Sure. I started buying real estate quite a long time ago. I've been buying properties for many years in different areas of the real estate investment field. The first property I bought at an auction from the State Highway Department. I had never owned any real estate before that. I'd never been to an auction. Quite an interesting experience. And I've bought and sold over 900 properties for my own personal inventory. I'm also a real estate broker here in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. And at one time I had a license to do Perc tests for septics. And I also got trained in doing title searches. I had my office co-located with an attorney, and I learned how to do title searching. So I've been involved in a lot of different aspects of real estate. I've done land development. I've bought property at sheriff sales. I've bought property at tax sales. I've bought bank REOs. I've bought HUDs. I've bought VAs. I've bought properties that weren't listed for sale. I use about 20 different approaches to acquire properties, including letter solicitation, for example.
It brings up some interesting points there, a lot of topics I definitely want to get into on our episode here. So let's start from the beginning a little bit. We have a lot of people who are earlier in this, in the stage. Did you just come into a huge pile of money and you inherited it and just started buying property, or was there a time when you were like reaching out to lenders and really having to be creative? Because I imagine a lot of times at a certain point, I don't imagine it's a fact that when people are successful over a period of time, they pile up their wealth and they get to a different place than, say, people who are just getting started. So could you kind of give us maybe a little bit of the background of that, the business for you in the early days and some of the challenges you had to overcome?
Sure. All four of my grandparents are immigrants to the United States. They didn't have any money. They didn't speak English, and none of them went to high school. They came to the country. They were all poor. We grew up pretty humble. There was a period of time where we didn't have a car. There was a period of time where we didn't have a TV at home. When we had a telephone, when we first started getting a telephone, we had this thing called a party line, which I don't think anybody has anymore, where you share the phone line with some unnamed neighbor, and you couldn't receive or make calls when they were on the phone.
Wow.
Such an antiquated, archaic notion. Most people probably didn't even realize there was such a thing like that, or no wonder why anyone would do that, but it was less expensive than getting a private line from the telephone company. So I did start with humble beginnings. I didn't have any money. The first property that I bought, I borrowed the 10% down payment from my parents, who didn't have a lot of money either. My father worked full-time his entire career. He never made $10,000 in a year. He worked 25 years at the same company. never made $10,000 in a year. My mother didn't start working until after I graduated from high school, and she worked as a waitress, and she never made $10,000 a year. So my parents didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of money. I had to kind of scrape together and get financing wherever I could. I think the first 11 properties that I bought, in one way or another, were 100% financed.
Nice. So you started out the same way that a lot of people that I hear, including myself, with not a ton of resources and having to be creative and learn how to buy real deals from the beginning, I imagine. So how do you get your best deals today? I mean, you're still doing deals to this day, right, David?
That's absolutely correct. In the last few months, I bought a HUD property. I bought a VA property. Went to a tax sale a few weeks ago, and we bought 8 properties at tax sale. There were maybe 300 properties for sale at the same sale. It was standing room only. Every seat was taken, plus people were standing there. There was like over 400 people there to bid on 300 properties. We got 8. I consider that pretty fortunate. Some people went home with nothing.
Yeah, I mean, 8, and I know the market's getting hot again. So 5 years ago, you go to the tax sale, and there was plenty of extra seats, certainly in Delaware County where we went to the tax sale that year. And then as the market gets hot and people come back out again, you're looking at situations just like this. What due diligence, what preparation, how did you approach that tax sale to prepare yourself to know how much to bid and win those 8 properties, David?
I have 3 rules for going to the tax sale. The first rule is that you have to know what the individual rules are at that tax sale. There's 50 states, there's 50 different rules and procedures and how they handle different things at the tax sale. You need to know what specific rules they are at the tax sale. For example, the one that I just went to, they don't take cash. So you can't go there with cash. One of the other rules they have is you have to pre-register a week in advance. So if you don't pre-register and get a bidder's number a week in advance, you come to the sale, you can't bid. You're not allowed to bid. You're not an eligible bidder. If you come with cash, you're not an eligible bidder. And they don't accept personal or business checks. So the only thing that they will accept are cashier's checks or certified checks. So that kind of limits the people that are there, but there's been a lot of publicity about tax sales and sheriff sales, so that increases the competition and the people at the tax sale, which runs up the bids. And it's a lot harder to buy properties at the minimum bids. There were times in the past where I was able to buy property at the minimum bid. That's a lot more rare occasion now. So knowing the rules of the sale is number one thing that I require. The second thing I require is I do a full title search and due diligence on the property. Besides doing a title search looking for mortgage and liens and judgments, federal tax liens and things like that. I also want to, in some cases, maybe check to see if there's any municipal liens, if there's any zoning issues, has the municipality condemned the property, things like that. And the third thing that is an absolute must rule for me is I have to physically see the property. I don't rely on Google Earth or any kind of other online application. Some of those pictures of properties are years old. One time, a few years ago, I went to a tax sale and several people were actually bidding on a property that had burnt down a few days before. And obviously, they didn't look at the property or they hadn't looked at the property recently, and they were bidding on the property as if the house was still standing, and it was total. It was hardly anything left except ashes.
Wow.
So those are my 3 rules.
So I have a couple additional questions there. First, you physically see the property. You have this example where the fire took place. What would be your requirement as far as prior to the sale? Are you driving around the morning of the sale early and looking at every property on your target list, or is it the day before? I mean, how close to the sale would you say is mandatory to physically see these properties, David?
I usually like to see it within a day or two before the sale. And, of course, it depends on what the property is and what the value of the property is. If it's a vacant lot and I looked at it last year because it was on the tax sale last year and they paid the taxes at the last minute, I probably don't have to do much, except driving by. Is it still a vacant lot? Yeah, it's probably still a vacant lot. There's not a whole lot there, and it's lower value property. But if it's a higher value property, a commercial property, I might want to see it multiple times before the sale. Maybe see if I could get inside the property, see if it's occupied, look at different things, maybe come by at different times of the day and night to see what it looks like at different times of the day. So it depends on the property, the value of the property, and if I've looked at it before.
And then out of 8, if you win 8 properties at the tax sale here, how many did you have on your target list? I mean, how many did you physically drive by? How many did you pull a full title search on to prepare to win those 8?
Initially I looked at the entire list of 300. As far as looking at the list and scrubbing the list, some of the properties I didn't bother looking at for one reason or another. And I did a preliminary search looking through assessment data online and looking at pictures online. And the purpose of that was to weed the list down and get to a smaller list. Then the list comes out 30 days in advance of the sale, and the owners have an opportunity to pay the taxes at any time up until the time of the sale. So a lot of the people will pay and get their property removed from the tax sale list. So I try to do my preliminary scrubbing early, but then wait to drive till later so that I don't go driving around looking at properties where people have already paid the taxes and it's not going to be listed for sale.
How many did you get to on your final list where you were pulling? Because title searches cost money and it takes time to do this driving. I mean, how many did you have title searches pulled on from that list of 300?
Maybe 30, about 10%, I'd say. And I probably looked at 30, some of them multiple times. In the past, I was doing title searches myself. My office was co-located in an attorney's office. They did a bunch of real estate. It was like 90% of their business there. They had 5 title abstractors on staff, and I asked the owner of the company, the head attorney, if I could tag along with some of his abstractors and learn how to do abstracting, and he said sure. And so I did that. I went along with several different title abstractors, and I learned how to do title searching myself. Back then, in those days, and I was doing the title searches myself, one of the counties where I worked, this is pre 9/11. This doesn't happen today, but they would lock the courthouse at 4:30 in the afternoon. But if you were inside, you could stay inside as long as you wanted. But once you left, you had to leave. The door was locked, and they had a guard at the door and all that. Well, sometimes I'd be searching titles after midnight. I'd be there before they closed at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I'd be in the recorder of deeds office searching titles myself, or I had a partner at one time, and one time my partner and I both were searching titles, and we hired 2 title abstractors to also work for us. So all 4 of us were working past midnight to do title searching. Our title search work was more extensive and a higher quality, I think, than anybody else who was doing tax sales.
Who did these 30 for you on this sale? You hired that out to the abstractors?
At sometimes in the past, I've used abstractors, and I have specific directions on how I want them to do the search. But on this one, we hired somebody who wasn't a title abstractor, but we trained them to do title abstracting, and they did title abstracting for us on an hourly basis. So we weren't paying per search, we were paying per hour. And what that does is, if it's a real easy search, if it takes 10 minutes to do the search, we're only paying for 10 minutes of work time versus paying, the same for a 10-minute search as you would for an hour search. This person that we had doing this isn't an employee of us. It's somebody who does other work. They don't do title work at all in their regular job, but they enjoy doing this, and they find that it's a challenge and to figure out everything. And this person actually takes vacation from their full-time job to come and do title searching for us.
Sweet. Some vacation.
That's how much they like title searching.
Well, that's pretty cool. Sounds like you lucked out with that resource.
We trained the person. The person didn't have any background, and sometimes they make some errors, and sometimes we have to go back and double check their work. But all in all, they do excellent work. It requires somebody who's meticulous and precise, but if you're able to follow directions and you're not sloppy, it's not that difficult to do title searching.
So you have 30 properties on the target list. You do 30 title searches. Do you then create some kind of a spreadsheet, or do you just know what you want to pay for every one of these and kind of make a minimum reserve bid? I mean, what organization process do you have for literally, the information you carry into the courthouse, if any, the day of the bidding?
I get a new list, an updated list that has the paids taken off the list. Then the night before the sale, after everybody's had their opportunity to pay, I'll go through the list and determine what my maximum bid would be. And I write that down. And then when I go to the auction, I pretty much stay to the maximum bid. There's been occasions where I've gone over the maximum bid if I thought it was a particularly good property. But I try to stay to the maximum bid, and if somebody outbids me, so be it.
And would you say, because it sounds like you've done these auctions and gotten good deals, including your first deal. I've done 0 auctions. Would you happen to have a set of rules, or would that max bid discipline that you have be some of the indicators of success, or do you have a few principles that you think lead to auction success you could share with us?
It's fast moving. It's really fast-paced. You have to pay attention. At this last sale, somebody I know came to the sale and wanted to talk to me during the sale, and I said, "Well, I can't talk to you. I have to concentrate 100% on the auctioneer." He goes through those 300 properties in an hour or an hour and a half. I mean, he's blazing through that. You really have to pay attention, and he could be blown by a property before you even know that the property was up for bid, and you could miss it. So it really requires 100% concentration. That's the one thing. The other thing is, by setting a bid beforehand and sticking to it, you don't get caught up in auction fever. It's a real exciting thing, and it's fast paced, and it's easy, if you're not disciplined, to bid more than you really want to bid for the property, and you could end up, eating away any potential profit. So not getting caught up in the auction fever is another thing that you should follow when you go to auctions. Do your research, be well prepared, set a reasonable maximum bid limit, and then don't get caught up in auction fever and bid more than you want to bid.
In the beginning of our episode here, you mentioned letter campaigns. You care to elaborate on that? Are you still doing that? What letters are being sent to what people, and what kind of success have you been having from that in the past, year or two?
I don't do as much letter campaign as I once did. I do a letter campaign for a lot of different things. We hadn't talked yet about land subdivision and development, but I did letter campaign for people that owned large tracts of vacant land. I looked first for people who were out of state or out of county. They didn't live anywhere near the property. I looked for people who had owned the property for a long time. And I sent letters to them saying, I saw by the courthouse records that you own this 50 acres. I might be interested in purchasing it. One of the things that I put in my subdivision letter is I put in the letter that I'm not going to require any seller financing, because if I'm doing this for a subdivision, I'm expecting to do a subdivision relatively quickly and hopefully start selling the properties relatively quickly, and then we would need to do, subordination of mortgages and a bunch of other things like that. And I think that, by paying cash or getting a mortgage on my own, that I'm able to negotiate a better price on the property. And since I'm not going to hold it for long term, seller financing isn't as beneficial to me as it would be on something I'm going to hold for a long time. And we've gotten good success with that. We've bought a bunch of tracts of lands. We've done subdivision and farmland and woodland. I primarily look for property that has existing road frontage so that we don't have to build roads, which is a big infrastructure expense. One of the properties that we did had over a mile of road frontage. It was about 100 acres, and it had frontage on both sides of two roads and one side of another road. So it had extensive road frontage, and we didn't have to build any infrastructure. We didn't have to build any new roads or sidewalks or curbs or anything else like that. And it tremendously reduced the cost of developing the property. So we've done letter campaigns for that. I've also done letter campaigns for houses. My letter's a little bit different there. And I've also done a letter campaign for scattered lots. I've sent letters to people, and I get a call. This has happened multiple times where the person says, our mother just passed away. We saw this letter in her papers that you sent her 5 years ago about buying her property. Are you still interested? And I always say, sure, I'm interested to look at it or talk about it and what are you looking to get for it and that sort of thing. So I've gotten responses off of letters that I sent years ago and bought property. It's kind of surprising. The first time that happened, I was really surprised, but then it happened multiple times after that where people kept my letter and I got a call maybe from their heirs to buy the property.
How about that? Letters are one of my favorite marketing strategies to communicate with sellers in that fashion for that reason right there, the staying power of a letter in comparison to, say, a newspaper ad or a pay-per-click Google ad online. I mean, the newspaper is tossed at the end of the day, or certainly the next day when the next newspaper comes out, and the digital advertising or a radio spot or any of those type of advertising mediums are gone the moment they're heard. But the letter, 5 years later, David, you're getting a call from the heirs, not even that same person who found that letter, probably with the important real estate papers for the day when that finally would come, when, he or she would consider selling the property. So, yeah, I absolutely love letters as a method for generating new deal flow.
I did a letter campaign in one community that has 1,300 houses. And I did this over a period of time, multiple years and multiple letters to the same people. And I did a couple other things. I did three primary ways of acquiring properties there, but I acquired 107 properties from 106 different owners. And letter campaign was the number one source of those properties. And there's only 1,300 houses in the community.
What's the reason that you chose that community? Why was this place so important, and what was the opportunity you saw there that you wanted to collect 100-plus properties?
I didn't set out to acquire 100-plus properties, but it was an area where there was some people that lived there full-time. There was some people who used it as vacation homes and some people who used it as retirement homes. And there were a lot of people there that had owned them for a long time. Many of the properties that I bought were the original owners. Some of them had owned the property 30 or 40 years. So there was that element, too, that there were a lot of people that didn't live there, a lot of people from out of town, out of state, and a lot of people that owned the properties for a long period of time.
Got it.
So those are kind of criteria that I thought were ripe in that particular community.
Am I correct in assuming that you were holding these as rentals more so for people who were living there full time, or were you also playing the vacation rental game there?
No, I didn't rent any of them. And out of the 107, I have 10 left. All the rest of them I sold.
Did you just buy to sell? Were they strictly flip properties?
A flip, or we would do some improvement to them to increase, their marketability. Some of them needed some work. The property values there, it was really strange. Between 2000 and 2008, property values there quadrupled. So there was a big buying opportunity, and I got in, fortunately at the right time. Since then, the property values have sharply declined. In some cases, like 50% decline since 2008. So it's been a roller coaster there, but I got in at the right time, and we did very well there.
I'd like to circle back around at this point to that. It was 100 acres on a mile of road frontage. Do you think we could kind of like play by play, including maybe purchase price, hold time, structure the financing, just kind of like dig through that? I mean, a deal like that for me, I would look at that and say, wow, that's something that I would see myself doing at some point in my career as a residential or even a commercial subdivision, but I don't know how to do that. I mean, do you think you could kind of like mentor me through that deal right now here?
Sure. The day that I saw that property, I was actually looking at another property and put an offer in on another property that was also a farm, with a farmhouse and a barn and lots of acreage. And I didn't get that other property, and it was sold to another developer. On the way driving back from that property, I saw that there was a public auction sign on this property, saying that it was going to be auctioned off and what the date was and all that sort of thing. I did some research before I went to the public sale. Kind of an interesting thing happened. The owner was in a nursing home. They hadn't lived there for a couple years, and the family had kept the farm and the house in the idea that maybe this person would come back and live there again. But after 2 years, they decided that, no, this person wasn't going to be able to come back and live alone in their home on 100 acres. So they decided to put the property up for sale. And there was an adjoining farm, and they offered the farm to the adjoining farmer to purchase before they decided to put it up for public sale. And they offered this 100 acres. It had a stone farmhouse that was built like in 1840. It was pre-Civil War, a huge barn, and several other outbuildings. They offered this to the adjoining farmer for $450,000. And the farmer turned it down, so then they decided to put it up for public sale, and they hired an auctioneer to sell the property. This farmer who had turned down the deal came to the sale and bid at the auction, and he thought that he was going to be able to get it for less than $450,000 at the auction. So he was a serious bidder. Early on in the bidding, there were some other bidders. But by the time it got up to $450,000, the only bidders were the neighboring farmer and me. And the neighboring farmer was planning on farming the property. A lot of the ground was tillable, and it had been farmed. A small portion of the property had a stream on it, and there was some area that was wooded. But the overwhelming majority of the property was tillable farmland, and he planned on farming it. I knew right away, as soon as I saw the plot, that this had tremendous development potential because of all the existing road frontage. Over a mile of road frontage, I mean, that's almost unheard of. And right away I recognized that this had a lot of development potential because you wouldn't have to build roads because the roads were already built. They were already public roads, already there. I thought it was worth a lot more than $450,000. And when we got to $450,000, the farmer and I were the only bidders. They were bidding it up at $50,000 increments. And
wow.
This is serious stakes. But I knew it was worth more than $450,000. I mean, for his use, it might have only been worth $450,000, but to develop the property, it was worth a lot more than that. And I ended up buying it for $650,000. And I was glad to get it at that price because I thought it was a good price for that property. It's 100 acres. Kind of an ironic I did a subdivision plan then, and I'm familiar with doing Perc testing, and this required Perc testing because it didn't have public water and public sewer. And I think we did over 100 Perc tests or something. I mean, it was an unbelievable amount of Perc tests we did on this property. They required, as a minimum, 2 Perc tests and 3 probe tests on every property, every lot, for the subdivision plan. We did the subdivision plan. Kind of the ironic part of it was we sold about a quarter of the property after we had subdivided into lots. So these were buildable lots. We sold it to the farmer who was bidding against us at the farm, at the auction. We sold a quarter of it for $450,000.
Wow.
He thought $450,000 was too little to pay for the entire 100 acres. We sold him like 25 acres for $450,000.
How about that?
I had gotten a mortgage from a bank. We got an 80% mortgage, put down 20% in cash. And of course, when the farmer bought the 9 lots for $450,000, that went straight to pay off the mortgage. And so we didn't have a mortgage for very long, thanks to the farmer. We grossed about $1 million plus profit on that.
What was the sale price on the residential lots? You got about 50? Did I kind of calculate that right based on your Perc test?
We got 36 lots of varying sizes. Some of them were a little bit bigger. I'd say the average was around 2 acres. Some of them were bigger than that. We could have gotten more lots if we would have built roads, but we didn't build any roads. We didn't put any sidewalks or curbs in. We didn't put in the detention pond. We didn't put any street lights in. We didn't put any street trees in. This was all, things that weren't required by the municipal ordinance. So we did comply with the municipal ordinance. We did everything they wanted, but we were able to get this in at a low expenditure. And we sold the lots for more than $1.65 million.
Did you sell these individually, or was it like one large home builder that then built out the tract, or, how long did it take to sell off this entire project?
It took 22 months. My business plan was that we would sell out in 3 years, in 36 months. We sold out over a year sooner than that. We allowed any builder in. We had building restrictions that determined what could be built there. The houses had to be 2,400 square feet with 2-car attached garages. We allowed in a variety of builders, and they had to meet we sold some to builders. A couple of the builders built spec homes. We also sold them to end users who brought in different builders. No builder built more than 2 houses there. So the houses weren't cookie cutter. Every house was basically different. And we sold out all the lots in 22 months.
What year was this, and what was the economic climate in the real estate market doing at that time?
It was appreciating. Prices were going up during that time. It was around 2000. And so we were out of there. It took about a year to get all the approvals, then 22 months to sell. So we were out of there, I think, by 2004. So the market still had some upward trend to go after that. I did another subdivision after that where the ordinance only required 1.5 acre lots, but we decided to put in 2-acre lots so the lots would be larger and more luxurious, and we required 3,000 square foot houses with 3-car attached garages. We sold that out in 18 months, and we had started projecting that the lots there were going to be $79,900 for 2 acres. We ended up selling lots there for $100,000 for 2 acres. Made more than $1 million gross profit on that one too. Those were quite exceptional.
Do you adjust accordingly when you're looking at these deals? I mean, do you put on blinders, David, and drive right past these signs and these type of deals in a year like 2009 or 2010? or do you just adjust your pricing no matter what, even though maybe there's not a lot of building taking place during that time? I mean, I guess to simplify the question is, do you pay attention to the market cycle and adjust
Sure.
the development strategy accordingly?
Absolutely. I did some later subdivisions. I did one in 2010. It wasn't nearly as profitable as those other ones were. The recession starting in 2008 had more of a drastic effect on land and lots and subdivisions than it did on houses. Lots are more of a discretionary purchase. People don't have to buy a lot. And so the recession, people concerned about their jobs and income and various other factors, their credit ratings. The lot sales were tremendously hurt, more so than houses in this area by the recession. As I said before, we sold some lots for 50% of what we sold them before, after 2008 versus before 2008. So the market has been tremendously changed. One of the things that happened in the run-up between 2000 and 2008 is that prices kept escalating higher and higher, and there was a lot of lots created, a lot of subdivisions were done, and so when the recession hit, there was a tremendous amount of inventory of lots that were already pre-approved and ready to sell, but nobody was buying them. I was working at another real estate office at that time in the early 2000s, and we had a listing on a property that was like 150 acres, and a very well-known developer put an offer in of like $2.5 million to buy it as raw land, and the sellers wouldn't take it. They wanted $3 million for this property. So he didn't buy the property. He thought it was overpriced, and he wouldn't pay that. Somebody came in and paid. There was a kind of a little bidding war, and there were other developers that were interested in the property. Somebody bought it for $3.5 million without doing any work or getting any subdivision approval. They turned around and sold it for $10 million. They did nothing to it. So there was a lot of that going on. There was a lot where you didn't have to do anything for the property, just tie it up and you could sell it to somebody else at a higher price. And the other thing that happened was people would get all their subdivision approvals, not do the infrastructure, and then sell it to a big builder company who bought the entire subdivision, and they put in the infrastructure and started building homes there. There was a tremendous market for that between 2000 and 2008. After 2008, that market totally dried up. A lot of builders went bankrupt. A lot of builders cut back on their building, and the ability to take a property either approved or unapproved and sell it for a lot more than you paid for it totally evaporated.
Do you think we're going into a market now where that is going to be the case again, as new home starts have not kept pace with population growth and demographic change? I mean, in your opinion, do you think we're going to see something like that where that market is going to get that frothy, or do you think that is unrealistic as a result of what the economic conditions were with easy mortgage money, et cetera, back in 2000, 2008?
I don't think we're going to see a repeat of that. This year has been better for new building in my area than last year, and last year was better than the year before. So things are improving, but there's still a lot of inventory. I still have inventory to sell. I have some lots left in a subdivision that we started in 2004 that I still have 3 lots left for sale. I have another subdivision that I've never put the lots up for sale. I just got all the approvals and am just sitting on it. It's kind of a retirement plan. I've never put those lots for sale. So they're just sitting there. They're already subdivided. They're already approved. They're ready to build, but I'm not listing them for sale, or I'm not trying to sell them or anything.
Kind of like money in the bank then.
Yeah, sort of like a land bank. I think that there's not going to be a repeat of the same thing. I think the money isn't going to be as easy, and I don't think that there's going to be the escalation in prices where you could buy a property and then sell it for 2 or 3 times what you paid for it without doing anything to it. I think that's not going to happen anytime soon. I've heard people say, though, that memory is generational. So after 20 or 25 years, people forget about what happened in 2008. So then they do the same stupid things over again.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. So I guess I'll be ready for it next time and see it coming, because I was certainly unprepared for this last one. David, you mentioned Perc tests, and for those listening that don't know what that is or why that's important, do you think you could just kind of like touch on that, define that, and explain maybe some of the dangers, pitfalls, or some of the things you want to come out of doing a Perc test?
The Perc test rules are usually determined by the state. So in different states, they do the Perc test differently. Here in Pennsylvania, the way that they do the Perc test is the first phase is called the probe. You do it with a backhoe. You dig a ditch, maybe 2 feet wide, 10 feet long, 6 feet deep, and you look at the different soil strata to see if there's rock or clay or something that would create an impervious level that water wouldn't be able to percolate through that. Perc is short for percolate. Then the second part of the test, you typically would dig 6 small holes. They're 6 to 8 inches in diameter, about 20 inches deep. You put water in them, and you measure how fast the water declines in the hole. You have to pass both parts of the test. If you don't pass either part of the test, well, if you don't pass the first part, you can't do the second part. If you pass the first and you fail the second part, then you can't build almost anything. You can't build anything that has a septic system, or you couldn't build a house with standard conventional plumbing. There are some alternatives to this, but the alternatives are pretty expensive. And one of the alternatives would be a composting toilet. We actually had a property that we bought at tax sale that had a composting toilet, and it was totally self-contained, and it had a little heater in there and a little churn that you could compost it, and like after 30 days it would be dehydrated and composted, and you could take what was left and like throw it out in your garden as fertilizer.
Oh man.
But this self-contained composting toilet costs like $3,000, and all you have is one toilet. We had that property for sale, and it was difficult to sell that property. People didn't want that. A lot of people, the majority of people want just a regular flush toilet that they're used to.
Yeah. I mean, take out the trash every once in a while. It's kind of funky,
So much of it dehydrates and decomposes that there's hardly anything left. But still, people don't want that, and for various of reasons. So if you don't pass the Perc test, unless you have an extremely valuable lot and you can do some expensive alternatives, you can't build on the lot. One of the things, I went and took the courses and passed the test and got the license to do all that, not because I wanted to do those testing or anything. It was because I wanted to get the education to learn how it was done, what was the proper way of doing it, and how to best do the test. Because I found that there was a lot of properties that had failed Perc tests and were unbuildable. I bought a bunch of them, and we went back in and we retested them and we got them to pass. Tremendously increased the value. We were buying stuff 10 cents on the dollar, and then re-perking it and selling it. Just a vacant lot. The only thing that we did to it was we had a passing Perc test done to it. I bought some lots for like $500. One of the lots I bought, I combined 2 lots. I paid $1,000 for one lot, and I paid $500 for the adjoining lot. And then I had a passing Perc test done on it for one house to be built, and I sold it for $80,000. So I paid $1,500 and then did a Perc test and then sold it for $80,000.
Yeah, it's pretty substantial. I'm going to switch back to our men.
You have to have specialized knowledge to do that. Not everybody can do that unless they know how Perc tests are done. You got to know where to have the Perc test done, know where to site it, know what areas are best for doing it. And you can't do that with every property. Some properties will never pass Perc test. You have to kind of go through the selection process right up front to not even bother doing Perc tests on certain lots because there are going to be lost causes.
Got it. So if we switch back to our mentor conversation, David, one of the things I made a note, I said, okay, I want to get into land development. So what specialized classes, licenses, et cetera, would I take? And one of them I'm going to assume is the Perc test. Are there any other specialized knowledge, niche classes or training programs that someone like me who wants to get into subdivision should take?
The Perc test is only applicable where you don't have public sewer and you need to have septic systems. If you're going to do land subdivision and development where there's already public water and public sewer, you don't need to do a Perc test. I did a subdivision at my house where I lived. The house was on a larger lot, and the house was kind of scooted over to one side. It wasn't in the middle of the lot. So the first time that I saw the property, I thought that something could be done with it. I thought maybe another house could be put on it. Well, then behind it, there was another tract of land that the municipal rules wouldn't allow it to be built on because it didn't have any street frontage. It had frontage on two alleys, but by their definition, an alley wasn't considered a street, so it couldn't be built on. I ended up buying that property, combining with the property that I already owned, and I did a subdivision plan. Public water and public sewer were already available there, and all the other utilities, including gas and electric. Did 17 townhouses in my backyard. Virtually got both tracts of land for nothing. The one I got as additional side yard to the house I bought, and the other one I got for hardly anything also. So I was able to do a subdivision without doing any Perc test on property that was behind my house to put in 17 new townhouses.
If a property failed the Perc test, are there any other more expensive options like mound systems or something of that nature, some kind of other tanks that you could put out there and still get around that?
You still need a Perc test for a sand mound or an in-ground system, but there are some other systems. There's one that's a small flow treatment plant, which is like a mini sewage treatment plant. There's also a system, spray irrigation. It's kind of suitable if you have a larger property and maybe even a farm property that you can spray the water into the air and irrigate. There's a drip irrigation system. So there's some other systems, but they typically are much more expensive. On the drip irrigation system, you could be spending $25,000 to $40,000 on the system. It has a computer and it has a manifold that regulates the flow of the effluent. It's a real expensive proposition.
Got it. So in most cases, something like that's not going to be cost effective is what I'm
Unless you had a high value property, it could be cost effective.
So, all right, I want to switch gears here a little bit, David, and I want to ask you, who is the most successful real estate investor or developer to you, and why? Could be known publicly, personally, dead or alive. The important aspect is why you believe they're successful.
When I had my office in with an attorney, he was a really interesting guy, and I learned a lot from him. He kind of treated me like the son that he never had, and like took me under his wing, and he was an older gentleman. He told me that he made more money on real estate, on renting property and building apartments than he did in his law practice. And he had a fairly sizable law practice. He decided early on that he wanted to do apartments, and he built the apartments using brick because somebody had told him that it was long lasting and he wouldn't have as much maintenance on. So he built these brick apartment buildings, and he held them for the rest of his life. He lived to be like almost 90, and his heirs still have those buildings and are still renting them out. He was the quintessential buy and hold. Some of those properties he built in the 50s and 60s, and they're still generating income for his families today.
All right. Do you have 2 or 3 life-changing books to share? It could be real estate, business, or mindset / success related.
My number one favorite book is William Nickerson's How I Turned $1,000 into $5 Million. It was a tremendous book for me. I read it early on in my career. The premise of the book is somebody with average intelligence can be successful in real estate. That really opened a lot of light for me and doors for me. I also like Landlording by Lee Robinson. That's a tremendous book. It's like 500 pages. It's the best-selling book on landlording. He sold like 400,000 copies of it. And I also like Buy and Hold by David Schumacher. Those three are my favorite real estate books.
If you could share the crown jewel of wisdom with, let's say, your 25-year-old self, what would that be, David?
I buy less properties. I bought and sold over 900 properties. I bought some properties that I shouldn't have bought. I bought some properties I lost money on. I bought some properties that I made money, but they weren't worth the risk or the time involved. You know, the reward wasn't sufficient to the efforts that I had to put in it. I would have done fewer deals, but I would have done only the better deals.
Got it.
A little bit of quality over quantity.
That's interesting. Nobody ever says to buy less properties. It's always more, 106, 107, send more letters, get more closings. So I like that line of thinking, a little bit of a paradigm shift to go for quality over quantity.
One of the things that we haven't talked about is, I have a real estate office. I do client work for buyers and sellers and landlords. And I also manage my own rental portfolio, and I also do land subdivision and development. I also have an aggressive acquisition program. I have no staff. I have no assistants. Okay. I have no virtual assistant. I have no receptionist. I have no bookkeeper. It's me. I'm not lifting a hammer or doing anything like that. I hire people to do all that kind of work, but I am the business, and I was able to acquire 900 properties. One year, when I still had a full-time job that wasn't in real estate, I bought and sold 74 properties. And I was primarily doing that on the weekends because I was working on a full-time job. I'm aggressive in buying properties, but I've decided now that I didn't need to be as aggressive as I was, and I didn't need to buy as many properties. I could have done just as well by buying fewer properties, but only buying better properties.
Note-taking. You mentioned some of that stuff, and I guess it's a good time to plug the book at this point, right? Do you want to talk about the book and kind of share where people might be able to find that?
Sure. The title of the book is How I Started with Nothing and Made $12 million in Real Estate. There's a website for the book. It's $12millionbook.com, and 12 is numerals. It's 1, 2, then $1 million book spelled out. The book is 342 pages. There's about 270 case studies of properties that I actually bought. Not students of mine or friends of mine, or I heard a story from somebody, and wrote it up in a book. These are properties that I actually bought myself. And it's in the format of a case study, and I put down for every property what I paid for it, how I acquired it, what was the source of the deal, how I financed it, what I rented it for, what I sold it for, or what the value is. And in the chapter, then there's a story of what I did to the property or some of the unique things that happened to me. We didn't talk about today, but in one of the chapters in the book, I talk about I bought at tax sale a $330,000 house that was only 12 years old. I paid $30,000 for it. Another property in the book I bought at tax sale, I bought a piece of land for $4,500 and turned it into a subdivision and made over $600,000. Whole bunch of case studies in there covering a lot of different things. Houses that I bought, small apartments that I bought, scattered lots, and subdivisions. All of those are topics that are covered in the book. You can also check it out on Amazon. I think I have 48 or 49 positive reviews on Amazon, and I'm thankful for all the people that wrote nice positive words about me.
So anyone listening now, like myself, when the book comes and I read the book, we're going to make sure we all head on over to Amazon and leave a few positive reviews. Fair enough?
That sounds good. I appreciate that.
Cool. Do you have any other contact information that you'd like to share at this point, David? People want to get in contact with you?
People can contact me through my website, $12millionbook.com. I also have another email address for the real estate business. It's my email address is david@centralpennlots.com. Penn has two N's like Pennsylvania. So you can contact me there at that email address, and I'm available to do speaking also. I spoke this year at a DIG subgroup in Montgomery County.
We'll have to get you out to the ring meet if you want. You can fly on out to Chicago, or we could just have you at the one in Philly there and make it convenient, or you could come to both. But we do the Real Estate Investor Networking group in both of those cities as well. So we'll make sure we get you on the schedule. Sound good?
That would be great. I appreciate that.
Well, David, I have several pages of notes, a ton of inspiration, a checklist of to-do items for my own career here, some new goals. So I appreciate you coming on and giving so generously of your experience, your time, and wisdom. Thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate it, and please contact me anytime, and I'd be glad to come and speak at your ring group, and particularly in Philadelphia since it's a lot closer.
All right, sounds good. We'll get it on the schedule.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, David. And thank you all for listening. As always, you can check out all of the REI Diamond Show episodes at www.reidiamonds.com. You can also make expert guest suggestions, submit deals you have for sale, and sign up for the new episode notification email, as well as take a look at the various deals I might currently have available in your market around the country. We are currently looking for real estate investment opportunities and or have real estate investment opportunities in the greater Philadelphia region, Chicagoland region, the Tampa Bay area in Florida, and also Atlanta area in Georgia. So thanks again for listening. Dan Breslin here. I will catch you next time. And remember, here at the REI Diamond Show, we are dedicated to bringing you the experts, ideas, and strategies for increasing and protecting your net worth.
Thanks for listening to the REI Diamond Interview. To receive the REI Diamonds newsletter and interview monthly, sign up now at www.reidiamonds.com.